Debate again with regards to rim speed at the equator and carousels roundabouts, and it was bugging me, so I thought I'd just have a little look at the numbers and have a quick look into it, because so I thought I'd start a fight, basically. Carousel versus the Ball Earth, and I thought I'd have a little look into it and see, instead of believing the arguments you hear from ballers, which is, you know, it's 15 degrees an hour, which is nothing, so that's only one revolution a day. You know, so that force would be so small you wouldn't feel it. And, you know, flatties are saying, but that's travelling at 1,000 miles an hour, you'd have to feel it, etc., etc. So I thought I'd have a little look at the numbers involved in terms of centrifugal force. So I've got up there the formula for it, and I'll just read it. Obviously, we've got centrifugal force FC is equal to M, which is the mass of the object, the person, whatever that's experiencing this force. You multiply that by the velocity squared, i.e. the speed that they're travelling at on this rim velocity, whether that's on the carousel or on the equator, and you divide that by the radius of the thing that's spinning. Now that's straightforward on the carousel, and as we go a little deeper, that gets a little bit more complicated than just the circumference of the Earth when you're talking about the radius of rotation, as opposed to a direct line to the centre of the Earth. Now, on the equator, that's the same thing, but so the radius is quite an important thing, and so is the velocity.
Hey, Adam, real quick, before you continue, check OBS real quick and make sure your sound levels are up. Chat's saying the sound's a little bit low, so we'll just make sure your levels are up.
It's
just
a
make
rarity.
Sure. I would take that mic and move it up closer towards. Let it bounce in the green when you talk.
Okay.
I can there just so you guys know.
Check. Cool. Okay, I've turned it up just a touch. Excuse me a sec where I go back.
All right, so everybody in chat, just let us know if that sounds a little bit better.
Is that better?
Fifi the butterfly. Can you hear us now?
Can you hear me now? got a thumbs up. That's all good. Okay, so we've excuse me, we've got a definition and hopefully a little understanding of where the numbers come from with regards to centrifugal force. So what I wanted to do was then compare these two forces. So the first thing I've done is see at the bottom of, I assumed I've got a person of 50 kilograms. So I thought that was a reasonable average number for either a large child or a small adult. And I didn't want to use 100 because that messes decimal wise. So in the formula, I basically needed to get the numbers to compare what these two forces would be like. That would seem a sensible thing to do when that seems to be the crux of the argument. Obviously, getting the ball earth radius was straightforward enough, and I've got the numbers. I won't bore you with it. The guys ran off in the week, and I tried to bore them with the derivations of these. But we've got the rim velocity at the ball earth of 460 meters per second, and the carousel was a bit more interesting to calculate because, as we said earlier about roundabouts, I wasn't sure what to exactly use. But I kind of looked up the standard thing for a carousel, and there was a decent website that had some physics puzzles with it in. So I found out from that the outside horse was 5.4 meters, and I also found out that the number of revolutions per minute was 4.3. And so from that, I did the maths to work out the velocity at that distance of 5.4 meters was 2.434 meters. I'm nodding off myself, sorry. So I thought let's basically put that in and express it in terms of forces. And as John will attest to, these are official units of bollock newtons, as Mr. Savage will attest, and kept correcting me every time I just said newtons.
You're not boring me, though, and I'm insulted. I got you to go through every single figure that you were putting forward there.
You were there were commas and dots all in the wrong places, mate. And there is an error, actually, John.
Is there?
Yes, there was. I forgot my square root. I said to you earlier that velocity was squared. And so it's quite interesting the difference that makes when we get to the reverse engineering. But I'll carry on. But
okay.
So I'm just going to do the maths. So we've got the maths here. There's the formula. Put the numbers in. Person weighs 50. The rim speed is 2.34, and the circumference. The radius R. I don't know why I should struggle on R. Is 5.4 meters. So you put all that in, and it works out to be a force of 54 newtons that person would experience, which sounds a lot, but when applied over the whole person, it's probably a bit like, well, as you would feel being on a carousel, like somebody kind of leaning on you. So that's the carousel. If we do the ball earth, and we put the same numbers again, we've got the person weighing 50 kilograms. Here we've got that rim speed I calculated of 460 meters a second. And here is the radius. Now this is obviously, it looks a bit bigger because it's expressed in meters as opposed to kilometers. I do the maths on that, and it comes out at 1.596 newtons, which is considerably smaller. Bollocks. I did it, didn't I? I forgot. 1.596 bollock newtons. So like I said, that's this 35 times smaller. So that kind of got me thinking, guys, could we measure or experience that that smaller force, and is 1.596 at the equator experienceable? And I would say now, you know, it is. Some people with vestibular problems might have issues, but certainly I think equipment would be able to experience that or measure that kind of force. It's not inconsequential.
Well, the formula and everything you just went over is the reason why, you know, out of all the, you know, big degrees people can get, engineering or engineers is one of the smarter type of flat earthers that you see, or more educated type of flat earthers you see, because they learn all this type of stuff, you know. And then when you start throwing in centrifugal forces, not just at the equator, but us doing like an elliptical orbit around the sun.
Exactly.
Yeah. Don't you
That's
start
what I
that
brought up on
now.
Wednesday.
These guys did that in the week.
We literally do a loop-de-loo around the friggin' Earth. Like they think we're just doing this big circle around the sun. We're not. We're doing a huge wide one and then looping around real quick.
Well,
like
that's
quick.
if you agree with that, or it's the vortex we're being pulled through. Either way, there's got to be acceleration and deceleration to make a whip around that frickin' sun.
They tried to have me do.
Their model's not a carousel, is it? It's a waltzer, and I hope people know what a waltzer is.
Savage out, right?
Here in
don't
the
start this again.
Here in the States, a waltzer is a tilt-a-whirl. So think about being on a tilt-a-whirl in that little cart that's whipping around while it's all going in a circle, and then actually take that tilt-a-whirl and put it on the back of a truck and take off down the road at 100 million miles an hour.
Johnson, can it, right? They did this to me in the week, right? And
right,
I did have a go at saying the maths, and as I should have pre-qualified the whole thing with, this is only dealing with the hypothetical rotation of the ball, okay? To put in the orbits and the centrifugal forces that would be involved in the orbit around the sun, galaxy, the universal center.
Why didn't you say?
Yeah,
why didn't you say?
Right. Actually,
whilst math would take about 2,000 years to get it right, wouldn't it?
That is a good segue to the context of the argument and some of the arguments and how they'll be put into context. And one of the things that ballers will say is the next point here, which is, you know, what will be argued is that the centrifugal force comprises only 0.33% of the force of gravity at the equator. And that's true, because if you calculate the magnitude of the force of gravity for a 50-kilogram person at the equator, it's pushing in the opposite direction 490 newtons. So in relative terms, it is a much smaller number. But it is a number.
0.33, you say, yeah?
0. Well, I think look, 1.596.
Nice Freemason number right there.
Interesting.
Where have I seen that number? You guys know?
No, it's a bigger decimal, guys. It's a bigger decimal.
You guys know the UN logo is cut up into 33 sections.
Absolutely.
It is a bigger decimal. I did round up there, so you could have probably only accused me of being a Mason.
It's all good.
Not the maths. So I just wanted to point that out, because that is kind of a thing that's going to be thrown at this kind of mathematics with regards to its significance. And like I say, it's a false comparison, because we're comparing the force of gravity, which is a different formula, and actually puts in big G and all sorts of stuff to get there.
And of course, a much weaker force than centrifugal force.
I'd just say it's a kind of straw man argument that, with regards to what I'm talking about. But what I did want to know is okay, it is a lot smaller, but I did want to know, would you be able to experience it? And we've done the comparison between the carousel it's spinning and the ball Earth spinning and the different forces. So I thought, well, if I backwork that and take the force that the ball is exerting at the equator and use that as my starting point, what speed would the carousel have to be going at to generate that force for the person? So again, I've done the back maths, and this is what I was saying earlier, John. What I forgot was that it's v squared. So when I back worked it, I only got 0.172, but it was the square root of that. So what this would mean is that the carousel was moving at a speed of 0.41 or 42 centimeters a second. So when you see one of those big carousels, it would take, I think, 1 minute 22 seconds. In Masonic in that one, is there? To go round. And I just wonder if you were blindfolded and put on that horse, whether you would notice that carousel going at that rate. So that was the best human comparison from the maths I could draw. And there's just one last little bit I want to kind of just go through, which is some kind of...
Take a swig, mate.
I am having a swig. It's medicinal, dry throat, excuse me.
No, I was just going to say, while you were taking a swig, that what I'd like to see, if anyone has got a carousel or a circus visiting or anything, and has one of those little spring-loaded Newton meters, bollock Newton meters,
There you go.
hang it off the outside thing, and let's test this for real and see if this math actually stands up to scrutiny, because I'm just as equally as skeptical of formulas that just seem to sort of work, rather than actually let's test this on an actual spinning carousel or a roundabout or whatever you guys call it over there.
Hashtag test it.
Well, with that, John, that kind of rounds it up. It is kind of, in terms of testing it, I'd said I've got some kind of, it says centrifugal force on the ball. And I was going to say facts, but it's not really facts. It's statements that the ball model requires and describes. So I'll just quickly go through them, and I'm done. The centrifugal force depends on the radius of rotation, which is different on the equator than, say, the 45th circle of latitude. It is slightly different on every latitude. Gravity is identical on the poles where there are no centrifugal forces, certainly the rotational poles, not magnetic. And the centrifugal force directs exactly opposite to the force of gravity at the equator, as I was saying earlier. True gravity is thus not the same on every point on the surface of the Earth. Standard gravity, which was accepted by the Third General Conference on Weights and Measures in 1901, and that's obviously important for trade and money, 9.80665 meters per second, is accepted as a constant. It actually corresponds to the value of acceleration of free fall on the 45th circle parallel north at sea level. And I started this thing saying it was a fight. So with that kind of last fact in mind, I'm going to declare that with regards to the fight of Carousel versus Ball Earth, it's a Carousel win based on a technical knockout by debunking that gravity is an actual constant.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Adam.
guys.
That was awesome.
Yes, well done, Adam.
I like it a lot.
Round of applause.
Nice, dude.
There, here's your round of applause.
Thank you very much, sir.
Now can we tear it to bits?
In you
Now-
go.
No, I'm only kidding. We've got two guests, I think.
We do still have two guests.
Right, we need input back from them, I think.
On the centrifugal forces, I always wanted to be an engineer, and looking back, I wouldn't have done it. I would have gone to school just to do it, just so I could better my arguments right now, and know these formulas better. I do know if you remove G, or G is the only thing that's not explainable, or the only gravity is the only thing you don't need in any of these formulas. but as far as what I can see, these type of things has what woken up so many engineers, as I was trying to touch on earlier. There's an engineer, wonderful friend of mine. He's writing a book right now. It's not a true story or anything like that. He's basically writing it about two flat earthers that met, or a flat earther that tried to convince another guy, that the earth was round, and the difficulties of going through that. The book sounds amazing. He sent me a couple chapters so far, but he's a retired engineer. He used to build printers, those big printers, that you see in schools and libraries and stuff, and he would design the parts and do all the math and all the engineering for the printers. And I asked him, I go, what was it that woke you up? And he goes, nothing really woke me up. I learned about centrifugal forces and physics, and he goes, and it's not possible. They teach you is not possible on a globe. And I started questioning, well, why aren't we feeling things and stuff like that? But yeah, I mean, as far as this stuff goes, I mean, these type of numbers and mathematical formulas are eventually going to be the nightmare to the people that have done it, because regardless of what you write up as a formula, I know a lot of things are reverse engineered. Like, they'll start with the answer and then they'll work back towards the question, and that's the problem with the heliocentric model. Like, they'll invent black holes and all these numbers and mathematics and stuff like that, but the truth is, math and formulas will never make water bend around a rock. So regardless how intelligent some of these people think they are when they use these formulas against us as flat earthers or truthers, those numbers will never be objective reality. And the only numbers we need to worry about right now is, in my opinion, is 8 inches times the mile, when you square the mile. So
well said. Adam's got a presentation on that as well, by the way.
I love it. I love it.
Well,